Hi, Charlie here. Imagine you're flying through the air at 41,000 feet. That's when the pilot makes a shocking announcement. The airplane has ran out of fuel, and one of the engines has stopped working. Please stay in your seat and remain calm. It sounds like a nightmare, but this actually happened on July 3rd, 1983. Air Canada Flight 143 was between Montreal and Edmonton. A few hours before the plane took off, the crew got onto the plane to check everything was okay. This included Captain Robert Pearson. Pearson was one of Air Canada's top pilots. He'd had over 15,000 hours of flight experience. Joining him in the cockpit was First Officer Maurice Quintal. Maurice had over 7,000 hours of flight experience. Now, during this time, Canada was switching from the imperial system to the metric system, but Air Canada had only been using the metric system for some planes. They were only using them on the new 767 planes, and Air Canada Flight 143 was one of those planes. Every other Air Canada plane was using the imperial system, but the 767s were using the new metric system. You may think this is inconsequential, but when it comes to an airplane, math is crucial. The refueling team were told to put 22,300 kilograms of fuel into the plane, but they filled the plane up with 22,300 pounds of fuel. That was about half of the fuel the plane actually needed. Now, the flight crew can check this, so you may think they would have noticed and flagged it up. But nope, the flight crew didn't even notice. They didn't even look at the fuel gauge and realize the tank was half empty. That was until they were halfway through the flight. That's right, they noticed they were running low on fuel halfway through the flight. That is the worst time to notice. That's because you don't have enough fuel to turn around and fly back, and you also don't have enough fuel to complete the flight. So, pilot Robert Pearson had to think on his feet. They decided to divert to a nearby airport in Winnipeg and make an emergency landing. But they soon realized that would not be a possibility. That's because both the left and right engine both failed at the same time. They were now 41,000 feet up in the sky. They did not have enough fuel and both engines were not working. And things only got worse when this caused the electricity on the plane to go out. By this time it was pretty dark. So the 61 passengers and 8 crew sat in the darkness. Also, many of the screens in the pilot's cockpit were shut off. This meant Captain Pearson and First Officer Quintal could only use the very basic analog instruments. They knew that they did not have much time. They quickly checked the Boeing 767 operation manual. They tried to find a page that explained what to do if both engines failed. But to their horror, there wasn't one. Boeing just assumed this would simply never happen. But thankfully, Captain Pearson was also an experienced glider pilot. So he had a very crazy idea. He decided to use the Boeing 767 as a glider plane. The downside is, Pearson did not have access to a vertical speedometer. This meant he did not know how fast the plane was descending. So Pearson basically had to eyeball it. Not ideal when you're operating a Boeing 767 with 61 passengers. He decided to try and glide the plane to Winnipeg. But eventually air traffic control told him he was falling way too fast. The plane was dropping 5,000 feet for every 10 miles they traveled. This meant the plane would crash long before they got anywhere near Winnipeg. So Pearson had to change his plans yet again. That was when First Officer Maurice Quintal had a bright idea. He suggested they land at an abandoned Air Force base in Gimli. Quintal only knew this base existed because he used to be in the Air Force. So Captain Pearson, Quintal, and Air Traffic Control agreed they would land at Gimli. But what none of them knew was that Gimli had not been abandoned. Instead, it had been converted into a race car track. And unluckily, a race was going on right at that moment. But the crew did not know this, so they began preparing to land. Captain Pearson dropped the plane down very forcefully. This was to force the landing gear down without any power. The pilots then realized something very bad. They were coming in too high and too fast. But they decided they had no other choice. But their problems weren't done yet. They soon realized a race was going on. The problem was, because their engines weren't working, the plane was making very little noise. This meant no one on the ground at the racetrack would be able to hear a plane about to crash into them. And also their front wheel did not lock into place. And also their plane had automatically deployed a wind turbine on the side of the plane. Wind was blowing and causing the turbine to rotate very fast. And this meant the plane was very shaky and even harder to steer. Captain Pearson realized the plane would probably crash and explode. But that was when one of their accidents actually saved them from disaster. This was the front wheel, which did not lock into place. As soon as the wheels hit the ground, Captain Pearson hit the brakes really hard. This caused the nose of the airplane to hit the ground various times, and then eventually scraped its way down the runway. This added friction slowed the plane down a lot, and this was a good thing as they came in much too fast. This also allowed them to steer the plane a lot easier, and it made the plane go in what was pretty much a straight line. It went right down the runway. This was a good thing because on either side there were spectators who were watching the car race. Eventually, Air Canada Flight 143 came to a stop, and amazingly nobody on the plane nor the ground was seriously injured. So what happened to the pilot? On one hand, Captain Robert Pearson is a hero. His quick thinking saved 61 passengers and 8 crew. But at the same time, him not checking the fuel in the first place caused the incident. Because of this, Air Canada demoted him for 6 months, and First Officer Quintal was suspended for 2 weeks. But they later appealed and were instead given an award. They were given a diploma for outstanding airmanship by the FAI. And it turns out the awards were deserved. Both Pearson and Quintal continued to work as pilots, and they had no incidents like this for the rest of their careers. But what about the 767? They scrapped it, right? Well, no, it actually continued to be used by Air Canada all the way until 2008. That's right, they simply repaired it and it was used for another 25 years. Although the pilots did make a massive mistake not realizing the fuel tank was half empty, they definitely did save the day. They both contributed knowledge and ideas that saved 61 passengers. And although it must have been a terrifying flight for everyone on board, everyone survived, and that's the main thing. The incident has since gone down as the Gimli glider. That's because it's the only case of a Boeing 767 being used as a glider plane. The moral of the story is, the Imperial system is really confusing. Good thing no one still uses it. But now it's time for you to make your voice heard. Are you afraid of flying? If you are, then leave me a comment down below. If you want some more amazing facts, then check out my Instagram page. But as always, thanks for watching. There are some more videos you will love on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.